Springtime is upon us. I'm not sure if you noticed this, but it does not feel like spring yet. I was driving into town the other night on the highway, and as the weather is wont to do in this part of the world, what had been a clear, cool night was suddenly a blizzard that left me wondering where the road lines were. It does not feel like spring yet. Some of us are thankful for this, and some maybe not so much. But at the same time, I know that spring is just around the corner. I know this for plenty of reasons. The fact that the florist is now selling hyacinths and crocuses. The fact that I could not get across Main Street yesterday because of the St. Patty's Day parade. The fact that I had to set an extra alarm and drink at least 2 extra cups of caffeinated tea last Sunday morning to get myself to church after the daylight savings time warp. And perhaps most importantly, and maybe even least logically, I know that spring is coming because I have faith that spring is coming, just as it has been at this time of year for every one of my own 31 years of life, as it has been for the decades and centuries and millennia of life for the ancestors that walk before me. The older we get, the more we come to trust the seasons and their inexorable, unchanging rhythm. Especially for those of us who live in this frozen white north during what seems like an incredibly unfair portion of the year. There is something deep within our bodies that keeps time with that turning wheel of the year. No matter how hectic and busy we are, no matter how far removed from wilderness and unfettered nature, there is a rhythm in our veins that pulses in time with the rhythm of the sun and the moon and the earth as she swings from summer to fall to spring and back again. There are very few cultures that don't have some sort of ritual acknowledgement of the shift of time and weather and season. Those of you who are a part of the Earth Spirit group here in this congregation, and perhaps others among us, are familiar with modern interpretations of ancient pagan and Wiccan rituals that celebrate that turning of the wheel of the year. Rituals that are unique and specific to a particular community and geography, but that still hold deep commonalities with practices in indigenous North American communities, European Druidic and pagan traditions, and other earth-based spiritualities around the world. As with all good religious stories and rituals, the practices that various different groups use to celebrate the vernal equinox repeat themselves and wind in and out of each other to the point where it's hard to tell what is authentic and what is not. We've all heard that the Christian holiday of Easter has roots in Roman pagan spiritual practices of the springtime turning point. But did you know that there is even disagreement about where the European pagan traditions of the spring solstice originated? Most contemporary books about paganism and Wicca make reference to the tradition of the goddess Eostre, or Ostara, the radiant spirit who manifests in green garments carrying her basket of eggs, the symbol of fertility and new life. She is often depicted accompanied by a hare, a manifestation of the god, playful and bounding and also full of that same vitality. But even this supposedly ancient tradition is no more verifiable or original than the Christian Easter. In fact, in all of the catalog of recorded myths and writings, there are only 2 mentions that we know of the goddess Eostre, of the tradition surrounding her, anywhere on record. The first is from a 7th century Christian monk, a historian known as the Venerable Bede. Don't you wish your name were the Venerable Bede? And he was studying the pagan traditions around him in the context of the church. And he simply mentions that that one word for the Latin month of April was derived in part from Eostre's name, whose festivals were celebrated in that month. And then many centuries later, Jacob Grimm, the author of many famous books on mythology and folk tales, including Teutonic mythology and, of course, Grimm's fairy tales, he mentions that Eostre seems therefore to have been a divinity of the radiant dawn, of upspringing light, a spectacle that brings joy and blessing, whose meaning could be easily adapted to the resurrection day of the Christians' God. But Eostre doesn't appear in any of the other definitive texts of European mythology, from Germanic or Celtic or Norse cultures, and there are very few stories about her that have survived until today. So much for authenticity. But when it comes to religion, does it really matter? The answer is yes and no. Yes, it matters because the particular stories and rituals of the myriad traditions of the world are uniquely, specifically important to different people with different beliefs in different places. The details do matter. Just ask a pagan and a Christian if either of them would be comfortable swapping out the goddess Eostre for Jesus Christ in their mythology. But at the same time, it doesn't matter at all. While they are not all about the same thing, they don't actually have the same answers. Religions of all varieties ask the same questions. Questions about ultimate meaning and purpose. Who are we? Where are we going? What is our relationship to each other and to creation? What are our duties? And what is our joy? And so it makes sense that we, in all our glorious human religious diversity, take our cues and build our metaphors upon the one thing that we do share in common, that we all experience, the earth and her cycles. That faith that spring is coming back, despite there being no evidence outside to suggest that it's true, I am in very good company with you, I trust, in that belief. And I think I'll risk to say, even in a room full of Unitarian Universalists, that we might share that belief in common. And so this is a powerful time of year. The vernal equinox is the time when science tells us that the orbit of the Earth around the sun is in mid-swing, giving us evenly balanced light and darkness. Midway between the hibernation of winter and the full flowering of summer. Experience and science and religious traditions all tell us that yes, no matter how cold and barren it seems outside right now, we are moving toward rebirth, renewal, regrowth, and resurrection. And then, being the metaphor-making creatures that we are, we draw parallels between ourselves and the earth. Just as the darkness of light grows less and less in this season, so we can have hope for increasing radiance in ourselves. Just as the cold, frozen earth thaws and explodes into bud and bloom, so can we expect a resurgence of life and joy and growth as a natural season in our own lives. And just as that balance of the equinox lasts only one brief, fleeting night, so too can we know that we need both light and dark, both rest and resurgence, both frost and thaw, and that none of those states will ever be permanent. I want to end this morning with a brief meditation that I've adapted from the Reverend Selena Fox, senior minister and high priestess of Circle Sanctuary, which is a Wiccan church, pagan resource center, and nature preserve here in Wisconsin. This is a meditation that evokes the themes of this burgeoning season: transformation, growth, new life. So I invite you to get comfortable yet again and follow along with me. I invite you to relax and take a deep breath and exhale. And again. I invite you to imagine that you are in a hilly countryside. It's just before dawn, at the beginning of springtime. The land is nearing the end of its wintertime slumber. You stand there in the dark, and the cold silence envelops you. For a long moment, you wonder if the dark and cold will ever go away. But then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, you sense that the ink blue sky is lightening. You face the east and watch the sun as it begins to rise. There's still a layer of snow on the ground, but soon the pinks and reds and purples and oranges of the sunrise are reflecting off the white crust of the earth in an explosion of color. Experience that beautiful color of the light that is dawn. And now, as the glowing disk of the sun becomes visible above the hills, you see a young woman appear on the horizon in the distance in the east. She's beginning to move toward you. And as she moves across the snow, the land awakens around her with new life. The snow and ice melt. The long buried brown grass underneath begins to change to a soft green. The song of birds fills the air. She is the goddess, Ostara. As she gets closer, a soft, warm breeze that smells of hyacinth and lilies begins to drift toward you. You see that her radiant face and flowing green gown are looking at you. She's carrying a golden basket filled with colored eggs. Beside her is her companion, a small brown hare that hops along at her ankles, every so often dashing off to nibble a tender green shoot, sometimes just for the pleasure of leaping and bounding across the new sprouting earth. With each step that they take, the land around them bursts into new life and grows green. New grasses sprout from the ground. Herbs flourish. Trees unfurl their new green leaves. Your heart leaps, and you are enveloped by joy. You feel called to shout out a welcome to them and to the spring that they bring. As you meet face to face, you see that the goddess Ostara and the rabbit are both smiling a welcome. Ostara then holds her golden basket toward you and invites you to choose one of the eggs as a gift of spring. You notice that each egg has a different color: brown and blue and violet and green and pink. You feel more drawn to one of the eggs than the others, and so you choose it, cradling it tenderly in both of your hands. You feel its weight, its shape, its color. As the goddess looks at you, cradling this symbol of potential and new life, she says, "This egg is yours and yours alone. You chose it, and it has chosen you. What does it represent? What in your life is waiting to be born? You hold the egg, still and quiet as you pay attention to the words, the symbols, the messages that emerge from within you. What in your life is waiting to be born? When you sense the answers that are for you, Ostara places her hand under yours, lifting your hands with the egg toward your chest. You hold it to your heart, and as you do this, you absorb it into your being. You experience the renewal of springtime, and you radiate vitality. Continuing to experience that vitality within you, you prepare to end this meditative journey. You reflect once more on the color and the message of the egg that you hold. You bid Ostara and her rabbit companion farewell for now, knowing that they continue to live within your consciousness to guide you in your springtime growth. When you feel ready, take several deep, slow breaths to aid you in returning to waking consciousness. And when you are back in this place, I invite you to stretch a little bit. Adjust your bodies that have been still. And I'd like to invite you all to come forward and receive a little token from me, which are these eggs that I dyed last night. They've been dyed with various natural plant materials, with beets and blueberries and spinach and things like that. So I don't know if I'd recommend eating them, but they're pretty. Take this with you as a symbol of the new growth and life that you have named for yourself this morning. Take it with you and let it remind you that the earth will indeed awaken again, sooner than we think. That the cold places, the frozen places, the dark and weary places within you are waiting to thaw and reemerge into the light, full of possibility and promise. I invite you to come forward. Let's start with the two side sections. Grab an egg and then go back. And BJ will give us a little music as you're coming forward.